Good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. Welcome to the Health, Wellness, and Self-Care for the New Year panel discussion. My name is Ron Minchak. I'm Executive Director of Communications. I'm also a member of the Staff Advisory Committee to the President, which is co-hosting today's panel with the Student Affairs Staff Development Committee. We're going to hold more of these panels in the future, so we want your feedback. You can give us feedback on today, but also give us your suggestions on other panels that we should hold, other topics you'd like us to cover. You can email that to sac@cofc.edu, sac@cofc.edu. We've got a wonderful panel of experts today, and you'll meet them in just a moment. First, just a few quick announcements. We're going to actually video recording today's event so that if people weren't able to make it, they'll be able to access the video and watch it later. So when we go to the questions, if you'll use the microphone so that the video can be sure to pick up your question. We're going to be raffling off some nice prizes after the event. We really want everybody to be present to win. So if we pull a name and you've gone, we'll just move to the next. We've got some nice stuff from the bookstore. One thing I want to mention too, SAC has been working on a number of initiatives this semester. And one of them is a new employee dining space at Liberty Fresh Foods. Some of you who've been here for a few years may remember we used to have one in the back and then it was used for other purposes, but it's been brought back. There's not food in there right now. You still need to go into the regular entrance and make your purchase, but let's use it. And that was a collaboration between SAC or among SAC, Business and Auxiliary Services and Dining Services. So we're grateful for them for doing it. So let's use it and show them how much we appreciate it. Lastly, if you want to learn more about other initiatives we're working on and even more details about the faculty staff dining space, you can go to the faculty staff news section of the college today. That's the college's official news site. It's today.cofc.edu, and there's more information there about other things that SAC is working on, as well as other stories for faculty and staff. One last thing, we've got a Twitter handle, so a new employee-focused, internally focused Twitter handle is @CofC Fact Staff. And so be sure to follow that. You'll find news for faculty and staff, employees of the college on there. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Robertson, Senior Director of Media Relations, who's going to moderate our discussion today and introduce our wonderful panelists.
Thank you, Ron. I'm going to pull this back because I've been told I'm very loud sometimes. I think this is an important panel to have because not only the start of a new school year, but the start of a new year, and a lot of us had New Year's resolutions. I saw somewhere that only about 40% of the people keep their New Year's resolutions past 6 months. And also I saw too the top 4 resolutions. The first one is finding love or working on a relationship. You guys are on your own on that one, okay? Third is travel more. And the fact that you have now traveled to the Stern Center Ballroom, I think you can knock that one off the list. Number 2 is get into shape, mentally and physically. And number 1 is to lose weight, eat healthy. That's where these guys come in. They can answer number 1 and number 2. Before I introduce them, a couple of quick things. I want to make this very informal. So I'm going to introduce them. They're going to say a few words, and then we're going to open up things for questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and Ron will have his microphone. He'll come to you and speak into the microphone so we all can hear you. Want to welcome the panel. Start at the very end there with Bucky Buchanan. Bucky is the Assistant Director of Fitness for Campus Recreation Services. He's also an adjunct faculty member with Health and Human Performance. He has an MS in Exercise Science, an MA in Sports Psychology. Bucky is also a certified strength and conditioning specialist through the National Strength and Conditioning Association. Next to Bucky is Rachael McNamara. She is a health educator with the Counseling Center. She's been working with the college since 2011, providing training and education on health and mental health related topics. Among other responsibilities she has is she supervises the Cougar counseling team and also teaches Kuru mindful classes, something I guess I need to take right now. She also, stress management and mind-body balance are 2 of the most popular programs that she does. Number 3, Charlotte. Charlotte is with us. Charlotte Caperton-Kilburn is in her 2nd year as the Director of Sports Nutrition at the College of Charleston. She's been a registered and licensed dietitian for about 18 years. And she holds a Master's of Science in Clinical Nutrition from the University of Memphis. She is a board-certified specialist in sports dietetics and is a certified eating disorder registered dietitian. And finally on our panel here is Klixbull. She is a staff nurse practitioner at Student Health Services, been there since 2013. Also a board certified family nurse practitioner. Her clinical interests include travel medicine, preventative medicine, women's health, and mental health. So let me have them say a few things, and then, like I said, we'll get to your questions. We'll start with Charlotte. You want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
If I can work the microphone, I'll try to do that. So just going to give you just a little bit of information with it being a new year and just talking about foods and making healthy choices and things like that. The one thing that I like to say to people is, look, you know, you got to have food from all of the food groups, from fats, proteins, carbs. Customize your diet to fit you and your lifestyle, and think about the fact that it takes about 6 to 9 months to make a change. So if you're thinking that I'm just going to go all gung-ho and change everything in my diet because it's now January the 17th, you're probably going to be among the 5% of the 45 million people who go on diets each year that fail. So just a little food for thought, and then we'll talk a little bit more about food as we go along.
So from my perspective, you know, I've been thinking a lot about why New Year's resolutions might fail. And from a healthcare provider standpoint, I think there are a lot of reasons for that. I think making a very specific goal is a good idea. And, you know, maybe reassessing as time goes on. So we're about 2 weeks into the new year. So you may have made kind of a resolution for yourself. You may not have, but now's a good time to say, you know, is this going to work for me? Is this going to be something that's sustainable? You know, for instance, I think it's, instead of just saying, I'm going to eat healthier this year, or I'm going to exercise more, saying I'm going to make a commitment to exercise, you know, take a walk for 30 minutes every other day. So it's something that you can kind of measure with time. And I don't think it has to be a major overhaul, like Charlotte was saying. Just something simple and little can have a ripple effect into other areas as well. So I think a small step is better than a total overhaul as well.
Okay, so I'm here to answer questions about stress management and some questions about meditation, if you have them. One of the things that I always say when I talk to any group about that is I have no magical new knowledge to offer you, but more that I'm going to be available to talk about things that you all probably have heard of but haven't started employing yet. And so I hope with the New Year's resolution that people can work to kind of establish some habits like they're talking about with the more physical health, also to help you kind of manage when acute stressors appear. Now, I know that Mike mentioned that love, finding love and connecting with relationships is on the topics, but it's not on this panel. I will say that's one of my other most popular programs that I do for students on campus too, but maybe another time I could come back and talk about that.
So I'll have two things I'll bring to the table right now, and then we can begin opening up to questions. But the first thing that I always like to start these kind of conversations off with is the very sad statistics. While New Year's resolutions are 40% after 6 months, fitness and dietary changes programs, success rate is 5% after 3 years. So that means 95% of people quit, fail, stop, whatever it should be. So you're doomed, and you're probably not going to make it. But that's not why we're here. We're going to do our best to set you up for success, and that's the ideal situation. And we'll start with this, which is, if I asked you to think about the word fitness, most of you probably have some type of image that comes to mind, and it's probably somebody that you've seen on TV or a magazine or an actual image of a person. You probably don't think of, in my case, I would think fitness, well, maybe that's someone that can run a mile in 5 minutes or under 5 minutes. that might be a stretch for some of us, I get that. But what I'm saying is that where we are with the word and the sort of context of social interactions is we sometimes, and most of the time, have the wrong ideas in our head of what we're supposed to look like and what we're supposed to do and what it's supposed to be like. And hopefully what we can do today is kind of break that down. So instead of thinking of that really fit person and what they look like, we begin to think more about what does it actually mean to have a level of fitness or have a level of health. It's probably not what you think it is.
All right, like I said, questions, raise your hand, and Ron will come to you. Let me ask you a quick question, Charlotte. You work with athletes, which is wonderful. I'm not an athlete. What is the difference between their dietary needs and somebody like me?
Sure, that's a question I get frequently, and the short answer to that is it's not a whole lot different, except they need much more than most of us do based on their level of activity that they're doing in their sport. If you think most of us exercise maybe 45 to 60 minutes a day, many of my athletes are exercising for 3 hours a day, or they have practice, they have training that they do that's 3 hours a day. They have a lot more stress as far as inflammation and things like that is concerned. But in the overall picture, many things that are good for my athletes are good for all of you as well. So it's very similar, and thinking about including all of the food groups again, as I talked about. The biggest difference is probably going to be, like I said, the amount and the timing of their food.
One of the things that I know I have to worry about is, Beth, when we talk about healthcare, yeah, I exercise, I do what I can, but family problems, family issues, family history, how does that play into exercising and health and well-being?
So, family history can definitely set you up for certain risk factors. But I think, talking to your primary care provider about that, they can have a good idea of your whole risk, stratification overview. And actually it can be good to have a discussion with them about, what am I at risk for and what specifically can I do? For instance, if you have a family history of high blood pressure, what's going to be the most effective goal to help you reduce that through lifestyle changes versus, just feeling like, oh, I'm doomed to have this family history of high blood pressure. There are definitely steps that you could take to reduce that risk.
Okay. One of the things that people may have gotten for the holidays is a new smartphone, new tablet, things like that, and with that comes a lot of apps, and there seems to be a bunch of apps nowadays concerning calmness and mindfulness. Rachel, tell me what's good, what's bad. What should I look for in this?
So I'm certainly not used every app, but there is a variety of apps to choose from that provide kind of guided resources for relaxation and stress reduction. So one of the ones that I personally use is Insight Timer. It's a meditation-focused app, but it does, like I said, guided imagery and other practices, and that one is free. They have a subscription plan too, where you can join certain classes with different techniques. There are other apps like Headspace, and then the class that I teach, which I have passed around a flyer about, Career Mindfulness, also has its own app too that goes along with its program. But what I like about apps is that you can see progress, and that technology kind of mixing with your goals can really help you feel like you're on target and see kind of changes even if you don't necessarily know about them fundamentally yet.
But it's easy to cheat with those, aren't they?
Not College of Charleston employees.
No, of course
We're
not.
all
No.
very ethical. I'm not, so ones that are timers or have meditation, you would have to actively go in to kind of change. I think that I've also used some for nutrition purposes, and it's easy kind of fall off if you're using something that requires you to put very detailed information or having to kind of research information to put in. And so trying to find one that fits kind of your ease of use will help you be kind of more on top of it and maybe more honest.
Okay. Now, Bucky, as you look out amongst the audience here, we're all beautiful and in shape. But we may have friends who are not in shape and wanting to start a brand new exercise program. What do you recommend for somebody who wants to start on square one?
Yeah, so first thing, and we kind of alluded to it just a second ago, which is making sure that we're ready to exercise. So there's a stage of readiness, and that might include speaking with a healthcare provider. The sort of in the last 6 months, one of the most amazing things that's happened in terms of really recognizing the power of exercise and its benefits is that we've restructured the risk stratification. Before, we used to go through this process of assessing family history, and if you're over a certain age, you have all these tally marks against you, blah, blah, blah. If you reach a certain number, you're considered high risk. Well, we've done away with that. And by we, I mean the American College of Sports Medicine, American Heart Association, so not me personally. I'm not saying those things aren't important, so don't discount those things, but the power of exercise is so beneficial that even if you are at high risk, we still recommend that you exercise, but that should still take place with a talk conversation with your physicians to start. So after that, I think that one of the biggest pieces of advice I give folks who are really looking to start something new, one is to ask for help. If you don't know what you're doing, you need to find somebody who does, and there's a couple reasons for that. One of the biggest reasons is that our brains are pretty smart. When you do something in terms of exercise behavior, if you do it wrong, the more you're going to keep doing it wrong, and you're going to get better at doing it wrong, and you're not going to get good at doing it right. It's harder to unlearn something than it is to learn something. So establishing that pattern, that behavior correctly is super beneficial. The other piece is just listen to your body. If you're tired, that's your body telling you something. So just being aware and paying attention to, yeah, that doesn't feel right. Well, then don't do it. Stop doing it. One of the ways we actually assess exercise and how hard you're exercising is you ask them, how hard are you working right now on a scale of 1 to 10? Really, we use a scale of 6 to 20, but it's a good indication of where you are in terms of how hard you're working. And that scale will adjust as you become fitter. One of the things we know about people who are not fit is that perceived exertion that you're doing is actually higher. It's intuitive. That makes sense because you're out of shape. But it changes. That psychology changes as you become fitter. So listen to yourself. If you feel like you're tired, well, you probably are tired. Maybe you should sleep in and not drink that extra cup of coffee or something to that extent.
Do we have any questions? We've got a great panel here, I think, over there. Ron is coming over with the microphone.
More observations and questions. First, I'm really loving these stock photos. So kudos together. I find it really soothing. But to piggyback off of what Rachel was saying about Insight Timer, I use that on the daily, and it's been really, 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 really great. I use it to go to sleep, and they also have 1 minute, 5 minute meditations where you can do it at your desk at work. Yeah, so I just want to echo that.
I will also say, because you can use guided meditations, if you're someone who's afraid of meditation because you think you have to be silent, it has to be completely silent in your space and your brain has to be completely blank, that is not the expectation of meditation in general, but also the guided meditations fill up kind of that silence so you can follow and not get caught up in your thoughts. But yes, the different time feature, breaking microphones. The different time features is nice. So if I have a minute before I have to go to this meeting, that can be really helpful to be able to shorten that.
I'm going to add something if that's okay. Some of these apps, they'll also have interactive games for breathing and whatnot, where you can follow waves, and it's maybe a little bit more interactive for somebody who's not used to sort of the guided aspect, or just that's not appealing to you. So that's also another avenue that you can do.
One of the great things about working at the College of Charleston is we're downtown Charleston. We have King Street right over there with any kind of food you want. Now, we know we can't afford to go there for lunch. And so, Charlotte, what would you recommend somebody bring, when you have to bring your own lunch to the office, what would you recommend should be in that bag?
Well, obviously I want you to cover the food groups, so I want you to have some protein, I want you to have some veggies, I want you to have some fruit. I always tell people, what did you have for dinner last night? Let's pack that and heat it up. Think about something that maybe you made on Sunday and you want to take to the office and have throughout the week, maybe 3 days that week, and you already have it there. and it's available to you. Whether that is lean beef, whether that's chicken, whether that is fish or shrimp. Obviously, we have to be careful about heating those things up in the office because they can tend to smell it up just a little bit. I was not making people happy earlier with my crab chowder that I was having, but anyways, so having those things, again, it's about covering the food groups, making sure you have your fruits and vegetables, and that you have your lunch and you take time for it. I think is really important, and that tends to be something that we don't do, is take the time to sit there and decompress and just have time to chew our food, eat our food, know that we have eaten. Remember, it takes 15 minutes to know that you ate the first bite of food. So if you ate it in 5 minutes and then you're hungry in 20, well, your brain still hasn't caught up, has it? So think about that when you're sitting there eating your food. And that's a really important piece of making changes to your dietary habits as well. I mean, I can talk about grilling food, I can talk about baking food and things like that, but ultimately it's about having the 3 food groups and having a meal that you're going to sit down and eat instead of skipping meals. That's going to be important for your lunch.
Is it important to eat one meal as opposed to the snacking throughout the day?
One meal, oh.
Yeah, the lunch, yeah.
Well, so it's more important to have food every 3 to 4 hours than to go all day long and have nothing and only eat 1 or 2 hours, because at the end of the day what ends up happening is your brain says, I've gone long enough, I need some food, give me something, and instead of you making a choice that might be a healthier food to eat, you end up eating something that is not as healthy for you. So again, maybe it's 3 meals and you know, smaller meals and 3 snacks, or maybe it's just 3 meals depending on your timing.
Beth, every time you see some commercials or things like that, you hear, you know, talk to your physician before you exercise. Is that really that important?
Well, I think Bucky kind of touched on that earlier. I do think it's important, especially if you have any risk factors that you're concerned about, to touch base with them, and you know, they might be able to help with suggestions on where to start in terms of level activity. So I think it's a great place to start, a great resource to use that's, you know, often underutilized.
And medication, could that impact the way that your exercise?
Yeah, certain medications could affect exercise tolerance potentially, you know, but more importantly, the physical health risk factors of certain medical conditions is what I have in mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mike, I have a follow-up question on
Yes.
eating, because I'm also a fan. Charlotte, what healthy snacks do you recommend? Because I enjoy food, so snacking is something that I want to make sure I'm doing it in a healthy way.
So I guess it depends on your situation, and if you have what you have available or what place you have available for storage. But most of us can take fruit, most of us can take dried pieces of fruit or nuts that we can have. I'd say be careful with nuts, because most of us can't stop at what's a serving. We need more than that, or we think we need more than that. So again, I like to suggest fruits, vegetables, hummus that you could use to dip, you know, your veggies in. Nuts with fruit, maybe yogurt with granola. Again, it depends on whether you have refrigeration or if you have something that you can take. But depending on whether, the other thing I think is really important is having some protein with each other food group that you're having. So yogurt is a good source. As I said, veggies with hummus, nuts, you know, those kinds of things.
Come to you next, Joe.
Thanks. I speak pretty loud, so I don't necessarily need it. Am I good? So this is for Charlotte. I try my best to do, you know, no sugar, no dairy, no gluten, and I know some people it's a kind of medical necessity because they're just allergic and, you know, for other reasons. What do you tell them when they go to a restaurant, because there really isn't many choices?
You mean to avoid gluten, dairy, and those kinds of things? And you're saying you do it for a medical reason, or are you, in general, you're talking?
Not me, but my wife.
Okay. Well, so you have to do your research before you go, you know, to find out what things are going to fit in. The thing that I've found with most restaurants is if you don't have celiac and are avoiding gluten because of celiac, then most restaurants can accommodate you for that. And most chefs will if you talk to them as far as that is concerned. So I don't think it's as hard as it used to be to avoid those particular foods when you need to for a medical reason. But you do have to look on the menu for the foods that you would need to avoid, and hopefully she's been educated in that regard. But talking specifically to the chef, if you are going to go to a restaurant, is going to be of the most benefit. And you're going to have to talk to each person individually about what they're doing in that regard. So I don't feel like I can give a blanket answer to that one.
Yeah, she just seems like, you know, it's just so troubling. It's just like, don't even go. Basically, is the idea.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, again, you said dairy, gluten, what was the other one? Sugar. You know, I don't think, I mean, I think you can find something at most restaurants that would fit into that. Now, if you're trying to avoid a grain or a food that's going to be converted to sugar, which, remember, all foods are converted to glucose because that's what our body uses for fuel. Even 60% of protein is converted to glucose. So I'm getting a little scientific here about this, but it's true, and there's a lot of misinformation out there when it comes to sugars in general, because even diabetics have to eat carbohydrates to have some sugar in their bodies. So it depends on what you're looking for and how you're looking to use that. But I feel like that you can meet those needs. Is it harder? Obviously, but with some guidance you can do it.
Yeah, well, thank you. This has been a great panel. My question centers around interacting with my primary care physician or my healthcare provider. I'm from Indiana, and you know, I've gained some weight over the years, and it was only exacerbated by the wonderful food in Charleston when I moved here. And one of my frustrations with interacting with my primary care provider, both here and in Indiana, is I say, well, you know, I'm really concerned about my weight, losing weight, you know, what sort of resources or strategies are for here. And I'll quote my current doctor, who might not be my current doctor for long, but he said it's really calories in versus calories out. And I thought, well, duh. You know, if everyone could handle that or could manage that on their own, we wouldn't have a, you know, obesity issue in this country. So my question is, what are some strategies or things or resources that I can discuss with my healthcare provider that might be available through health insurance or speaking with a nutritionist or things like that, rather than, you know, try one-off advice? I feel like if I had a health crisis, I would get much more valuable information than my prevention piece now.
Yeah. So I certainly feel like some providers are better than others in preventative care. So, you know, you can assess that relationship for yourself and see if maybe a better, you know, a different provider might be good. But I know, you know, locally there are definitely some great resources. MUSC has a great weight loss management group right now. And I know with the State Blue Cross Blue Shield plan, there's a resource through them that's available to sign up for that, you know, is free through the insurance that's offered here. So that's certainly something, you know, to look into. But, you know, finding, you know, just a simple resource like Weight Watchers really works great for some people. That's been one of the, you know, best proven plans for weight loss that's accessible to most communities. So that's certainly something to look at too. But I would definitely look for a better answer than calories in, calories out. I think, you know, finding somebody that's more receptive to that conversation might be a good idea.
Okay. I'm going to respond to that too. So I'm going to approach this from a slightly different angle, because I would say that in order to lose weight, you have to eat less and do more. There's nothing you can do about that. how that's accomplished might be different. So I'll give you some examples if you don't mind. Adherence is everything, so it's whatever plan you're going to do is the best one for you, the one that's most comfortable, the one you might play with some type of, and I'll be careful about this, but dietary restrictions. I'm not saying to demonize any food group because I think that's a bad way to approach it. You know what? There's some pretty good research that's just really come out regarding weight loss and in terms of like what are the best practices. The basic end of it is it didn't really matter. It's the one that you can create the calorie deficit in, the one that you can stick to. So whether that's going low fat or high fat, whatever dietary plan or option you want to go to, they all work the same mechanism, which is you eat less calories and you expend more calories. So it's that balance is tricky. So it's really about finding what the most sustainable way to do it. One of the unique, interesting features of losing weight is that you become hungrier. And so it gets harder, and that my understanding is that you stay that way. That hunger, especially the particular hormones associated with that drive hunger, are elevated through about 2 years as you continue your weight loss journey. So, and then there's also things like rebounding that happens, where then you actually your resting metabolic rate changes, and so then it's like you actually require less calories, and it gets really complicated. It's really about finding the strategy that's going to work, and one that you're going to stick to above and beyond any other fad diet that you hear of. There's so many out there that it's kind of hard to even talk through them, because I swear every time I put on a social media network, it's a new thing. Someone's got the new answer, the new key. There's no key. There's no one right answer. So it is difficult and it's challenging, and I do know that there are some really good local resources, and we're actually trying to start a couple here on campus with our weight management program. So
I'm going to add a little bit, not about the nutritionist side or necessarily exercise, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the mind too. And so one of the things that I think people don't really consider is how much habit leads to behaviors and how food is a primary reinforcer. And so I think a lot of change, whether that's what you eat, whether you exercise, whether you have a stress regulation plan, really looks into kind of your planning and understanding of what leads you to be in the situation you don't like, because it is an automatic response to what's going on around you, and so adjusting those. So my example that I always use is when I was younger, because I usually talk to college students, but like say when I was in high school and in college, we had the snack food in a cabinet, right? And it's all in the cabinet. And the first thing I would do when I came in the house in high school and in college was go to that cabinet and open it and look at it. Whether I was hungry or not, I'm gonna look at the high sugar, salty, and savory snacks, and then I'm gonna eat them because they're there and what I like the texture, they're reinforcing or whatever. So if I was choosing to kind of try to watch what I'm eating, trying to live healthier, maybe trying to lose weight, then that cabinet has to not exist anymore for me, right? So that has to be disbanded, has to take part, because it's become reinforced by my lifetime of activity of going to it. And so sometimes we can make some modifications to make it easier to reduce some of those things that are ingrained that we don't even notice we're doing them until we're like halfway through the snack. So planning for your snack, I think, was a great idea in advance.
Got one here, and then we'll get two more.
You had mentioned social media. I find trends, for instance, coconut oil. My parents sent us a box of coconut oil and said, this is great because you have high blood pressure. And then I read an article 2 weeks ago that coconut oil is not good for you. Where is the resource that I should be looking at to see if this fat is real or not, if blueberry is the superfood, or...
I'll say one thing, and I'll let our dietitian solve this problem for you.
So I just wanted to, mine goes along with that. I see so many for like, try this new vitamin, try this new vitamin, try this, and it's like overwhelming with all the different kinds, and I don't know which ones are real or good, and like, I don't want to go to my doctor and be like, here's a list of all these things. Have you heard of them? Do they work? So if you have any kind of thoughts on those trends too.
Yeah, so I'll say that this is the very first thing I teach my students when I'm lecturing. What's logical is not always physiological, and so there are a host of you can go deep into some dark holes on the internet, social media, with all these fads and trends and ideas and thoughts. I would venture to say that a vast majority of them are wildly inaccurate and dangerous. And that's why we have people like dietitians that you should be listening to. So I'll let that one go to you.
So I know there's been this huge trend with coconut oil, and everybody thinks it's all great because it's a medium chain triglyceride, and it should be used differently in your body and digested differently and be really good for you. The research does not hold up on that. So when you look at evidence-based research, it is more of a not hydrogenated, but more of a saturated fat than it is a medium chain triglyceride. So therefore, that's why you're seeing all of the new information out about coconut oil is not as good as everybody wants you to believe that it is. I will say to you what I say to people when I counsel them all the time, which is, remember this: everyone who wants you to buy something has their interest in mind, and they exploit a small part of evidence-based research to get you to buy their product because they want to start selling that product. And if it's not someone who is a registered dietitian or someone who does and there's a difference in a registered dietitian and a nutritionist. Remember, I have a degree that it took me 6 years to get, and I had to pass an exam for it, and I have to continue to have education. There are people who get 2-week degrees and call themselves nutritionists who are going to promote things to you that they want you to buy. And I guess I'm getting on my soapbox just a little bit. The 4 of us have had this discussion, so I don't think I'm saying anything that we don't all agree with. So, you know, you have to look at, where is my information coming from? Is it coming from somebody who's actually doing research in this? And when they give me this information, do they quote studies that have been replicated that show that this really works and that it has been replicated? Because I can tell you what happened to me, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen to you guys. So if I'm giving you what happened to me, then that's just me reporting something that actually happened when I ate a food or did a specific exercise. So in other words, things that can be replicated are the things that we should be following. And so again, it goes back to, I think, my opening statement of, when you look at things, are you being asked to totally eliminate things from your diet? Because even coconut oil can be okay in moderation. But is it the thing that I'm going to think is going to save my life or my blood pressure or something like that? You know, so where's the research to show you that it's going to happen? And one other thing that I'll touch on, and I'm sorry I'm getting long-winded, but you mentioned other things that people purport as being, you know, important, or people say, oh, don't eat things that have scientific names that you can't pronounce, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so just FYI, and I wish I had brought this and we could have put it up, but the chemical names for blueberries, just blueberries, okay? Nothing else in the blueberries is about this long. That's how many words, that's how many chemical words make up blueberries, okay? So that's another thing that has been used as a way to get us to buy things by saying, oh, if you can't pronounce the scientific name. Well, I don't know. Do you know what triglyceride looks like? I mean, fatty acids and triglycerides are a part of amino acids that make up things. So therefore, if those words are in there, unless you're somebody who's studied them, you might not know what that word is, and you might not be able to pronounce it. So another myth that is reported out there, and we are all, you know, asked to believe. So I would say ask your physician. I know sometimes physicians don't know. So if they won't give you the information that you need, then ask to be, you know, well, can I see a dietitian? Can I see someone who can help me learn to do this exercise the way that I need to? I need you as my physician to give me that referral so that I can do that. So.
Yes, we may be revisiting something that we don't need to, since you're saying calories in, calories out, similar to what you didn't like the doctor said. But I noticed you didn't say dairy products. So know, back in the day, that was one of the most important food groups. I recently have experience with my cousin who's in his 50s who had a couple of heart issues, and his father had as well. And he says, I don't know how, I play pickleball, blah, 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 he had high cholesterol. And he went on a completely plant-based diet after this, and within like 4 months, he's lost about 30 pounds, his cholesterol levels went way, way, way down, but no dairy, no meat, and he makes a lot of his things at home. And he's very happy with the foods he's eating. But dairy products, where are they now?
So I should have said this in my statement, and I didn't. I talked about carbs. I said this when we did our little talk, but to me, carbohydrates are dairy foods, okay, because milk contains dairy, but it also contains protein. Grains are a carb food. Fruit is a carb food. I would consider vegetables just a fiber. There's not that much carb that your body's actually going to utilize. So that is one of the reasons why when people are trying to lose weight, they may eat more vegetables than they do some of the other foods. And there is a whole move toward a plant-based diet. I have no opposition to that, but if you don't know how to meet your protein needs and you don't find out how to do that when you're on a plant-based diet, then your hair's going to fall out, your fingernails are going to look funky, and you're going to feel not very good. So I'm just trying to be honest when I give you the information about this. I don't really care if people do it. I will help you do it. But don't tell me that you want to be a plant-based diet, a vegetarian, and you don't eat beans, you don't eat tofu, you don't eat nuts. Then where are you going to get your protein? Are you going to eat 6 cups of protein, of broccoli, to get the protein that you need in 3 ounces of meat? I don't think so. You know, it's not going to happen. So, sorry. On my soapbox again.
Cheeses and milks and eggs, they're still good. Because
yes.
The medical community keeps telling us different things about our food.
No, medical community has been pretty steady in terms of it's the outside community that's been picking it apart, and it does not hold up. So I would argue that the improvement that was seen has been due to weight loss. How that weight loss was achieved was by elimination. Those are 2 different things when you look at them. I hate to be kind of harsh about that. Well, I know we deal with this all the time.
Yeah, and the other piece of that is you have to remember that he probably...
Well, he eats a lot of beans, but he had a life scare.
Well, exactly, and he probably cut his caloric intake, and he could have done that in other ways too. I mean, and so I don't mean to make light of what he did because it's awesome, but the truth of the matter is he significantly cut his caloric intake, which is a piece of what Bucky was saying earlier. And sometimes it's not even just about cutting your total caloric intake, but it's about making small little changes. Maybe you weren't eating enough vegetables and you were eating plenty of fat and protein or fruit, but now you put the vegetables in there that helps you to not need to eat as much. Or maybe you started drinking water when you weren't drinking water before. So now you feel like you've eaten and you're able to lose weight in that regard too. And remember, I just want to go back to something Bucky and we talked about when the 4 of us got together. Weight loss is not always the goal. Sometimes being fitter is the goal and being the size that you are. And I don't mean to make light of that at all, but we both know that the research shows that it's about exercise, it's about fruits, it's about vegetables, it's about, you know, healthy fats, it's about protein that we take in and moving every day, no matter what that might be. So.
Okay, another question over here.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit, if that's okay, from food. So I hope others can relate to this, probably because most of us sit at a desk most of the day. So I've been noticing recently that, like, in the evenings, I'm getting this jaw pain, and then when I think about my day, I think it's usually when I've had a more stressful day. So I'm particularly interested, I think, in like the stress relief part of it, but also the exercise part of it, of things you can do for like any neck pain, jaw pain, things that you're definitely feeling from tension.
I'll start. So interestingly, your clenching mechanism is something we do when we're stressed out. I know that's intuitive, but it's really something this is part of my research that I did when I was in graduate school. You can restrain rats and let them chew on sticks, and they feel better. So I'm not asking you to chew on sticks. What I would say is, what we do know in terms of breaking up your day, if you're sitting for long periods of time, for instance. By the way, this research has just come out. Standing desks are really not as beneficial as you think they are in terms of energy expenditure. Surprise! Sorry. Instead what you should do, and what I would tell you to do, and this is just a rule of thumb, is for every 30 minutes of sitting time that you have 90 seconds of walking. You can do things like improve your blood sugar levels just by walking for 90 seconds, and some of your cognitive function too. So there's that. That does not exclude you from exercising. You still need to exercise, and the way I'll frame this is, if you walk out this door and you see a tiger, a lion, whatever it should be that's going to scare the crap out of you, your heart rate is going to go up and your blood pressure is going to increase. The same thing happens when you exercise. The biggest difference is the thing between your ears and how you perceive the threat, right? You're not really perceiving exercise as a major threat, but the benefits are associated with it. But it's the same response. It's the same exact stress response that you have when you walk out the door and see a lion and if you're hopping on a treadmill. Periods of high stress, find a way to relieve that stress, whether it be, you can go one of two ways, I would imagine, which is you could use that stress response up through exercise, or you could try to calm it down through some type of self-regulatory mechanism like meditation, for instance. So I'll be quick with my answer so she can respond.
I feel like he should go first. But yes, so yeah, the jaw pain is something very associated. Headaches at the end of the day, neck and shoulder pain is associated with many of us who sit at a desk. And so that is something to monitor. So one of the things that you learn if you ever spend any time in say, cognitive behavioral therapy is to try to recognize kind of signals sooner so that you can act on them sooner. And so I know this is not a therapy question, but the response is if you notice regularly at the end of the day that you're having these symptoms, it means interspersed throughout the day, you need to take moments to check in on that symptom and what you're doing. And so I clench my teeth too, and apparently I do it at night too. So when so if I'm sitting in the day and I'm like, have a moment where there's a pause, I might be like, well, what am I doing with my teeth? And I might purposely try to relax my jaw, or move my jaw, or move my shoulders, or things like that. But that research on not staying still at the desk is very solid. And I wish all of you could say go to a public health conference or training at some point, because it is totally different than any other fields I've gone to, because literally every 40 minutes they have like into the schedule movement periods where they have 5 minutes of yoga, 5 minutes of cardio, and just trying to like get people to move, because at a conference you're doing so much sitting and listening. So the body does not want to be stationary. And he's right. The way to handle responses to stress, since that's an adrenaline and cortisol response, is to somehow signal to your brain that you don't have the bear, he didn't say that exactly, but you don't have this like scary thing approaching you right now. And so anything you can add at that moment to give signals to your brain will help you kind of reach a lower kind of homeostasis point. And so really the best way to do that quickly is actually kind of an intensive exercise burst to get the adrenaline and get your parasympathetic nervous system to activate it. But you can also work on other signals. And so if you think about back to that biology lessons in elementary school about the flight or fight or freeze response, you'll know major systems get affected. So breathing, heart rate, muscle tension. And so if you deliberately work with one of those symptoms at relaxing that symptom, then your brain gets those signals that you don't have to be that alert and aware. And so exercise does that because that's muscle tension and breathing, and it affects that. But meditation helps that by slowing it down. And when your brain gets the slower breathing, the pulse goes lower, I imagine the blood pressure goes lower, and then that's going to send that signal to this parasympathetic nervous system faster than you kind of being caught up in whatever the mental stress that's coming from that job.
Sorry for Joe. We've got 2 more questions, and I want to leave time for the raffle, so we've got 5 minutes here.
Thank you for having this panel. A couple of years ago, NPR ran a story on how the sugar companies influenced research back a half a century ago, what kind of mechanisms have been put into place, assuming that there have been some, that would lead to, I guess, more truthful research? Is that a good question, or a good way to ask the question?
Yeah, I'll jump in, but feel free. So conflict of interest is certainly a real problem. I would also say that you know, good research and good science is good research and good science, regardless of who's supporting it. So, you know, is it replicable? Is the methodology solid? So, and I know that we're not all trained in those particulars, but it's same thing could be said with some of the beef and cattle industries. They have funded a lot of the protein research. That still doesn't mean that the research is bad, but you do have to pay attention to those things. Like I said, they are real threats. But they're, you know, you can do things to control for them. You know, there's a really famous it's NUSI, which is Nutritional Science Institute, I think, and they were funding a lot of high-fat ketogenic stuff that's sort of popular now. And they, some of the lead researchers sort of found research that sort of conflicted with the interests of the group. And they try to remain blind, and it's a whole story that kind of blew up. But the thing is that, you know, when we have full disclosure, and I think if you have solid methodology, and you have, you find ways to blind and double blind and whatnot, it helps, but it's certainly something that can't be completely eliminated from the influence within the science that comes out, because it is a real problem, I would say.
One more?
Back to the Randy raffle. And let's see how quick this is. I will squeeze in one more. So let's see.
Once again, thanks for coming, you guys. We really appreciate it. But we're talking about New Year's resolutions and the high failure rate of keeping these. And so I was wondering if, and I'm sure Rachel, you have some information on it, habits, about keeping good habits and trying to keep them throughout the year, and then trying to break bad habits and keeping up with those as well. And anybody can speak to it, but.
I think my mind just went in like 1,000 directions when you asked that. And so we actually did have, I think, a really good conversation about this when we met to prepare for this too. And so I definitely think other people here have ideas on this. I think that one of the ways I approach things, of course, is through my own lens. And so we're taught in our programs that you can have a tendency for a particularly thought pattern that may be negative, right? And if you know what that is, you can plan for it. So for me, I tend to be a black and white thinker. So if I set up like a New Year's resolution that I'm going to exercise 4 days a week, I'm going to not eat desserts after 8 p.m., and then it's like Thursday and I haven't exercised, then I'm like, this week is done. Or if it's been 2 weeks, I might be like, you know what, it's a failure, I'm just gonna do whatever I wanna do. And so for me, I need to think, I'm a planner, I need to plan through what my typical response is and try to put activity and thought into what am I gonna do when I'm thinking that way at the beginning. And so I think a lot of New Year's resolutions fail because that people haven't really planned it out. Like, I wish I was in better fitness is not a very good setup for changing patterns of behavior and meeting a goal. Whereas if you set a more specific goal and you have some thoughts about what has been the thing inhibiting me from achieving that already, and make some planning around those thoughts and behaviors that surround those things, that can really help you as you go forward. And then I feel that it's really helpful to have an accountability system, an accountability partner for you. Now, some people that's not their personality, but if, say, like my husband recently started a goal of running, you know, it is very much important to him that I'm in line with his goal, because then I am doing things to help kind of with those barriers as well.
I've said a lot today.
That was wonderful. Let's hear it for our panelists and our moderators.